Well, hey there, folks. Good morning, and welcome to this special presentation of the Mike Seibert Radio podcast. I am your host, and I wish this was an occasion with happier circumstances. But if you are in the Seattle area, if you've been a fan of Seattle radio, broadcast radio, music, you have no doubt by now heard of the passing of broadcasting icon Bob Rivers. His battle with cancer ended earlier this week at the age of 68, way too damn soon. Since hearing that news on Tuesday, I've been upset, uh, numb, hurting, melancholy, and there's been a outpouring of support and tributes. Like my Facebook feed is it's just all Bob. It's all Bob at this point. But what I thought we would do today is this is a follow-up of sorts to some of the stuff I said on my live stream the other night, whereas I closed out, like I was still very raw and unorganized and all that. Now that it's a couple days later, I've kind of got my head screwed on a little bit, but I knew I needed a partner to be able to kind of like process some of this stuff. So we're going to talk about our friend Bob Rivers, our mentor Bob Rivers, and of course radio broadcasting icon Bob Rivers. But joining me to share in the platform and to share stories, experiences, thoughts, feelings, a Seattle radio legend in his own right, the one and only BJ Shea. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mike, especially to talk about, like you said, the great person in both of our lives, Bob Rivers. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I usually tell stories chronologically. I'm very just like chronologically minded. But this time I kind of want to start kind of sort of in the middle, and maybe we'll branch off from there. I have been directly influenced by BJ. There is a zigzagging line between listening to his radio show and where I'm at now talking to you here today. And it's a huge honor to be able to pay that forward and to share the platform. But my relationship with Bob is very different than BJ's. And that's why I thought this would be a really fun conversation. I knew Bob not as much as the broadcasting icon, the Radio Hall of Famer. I knew him as a mentor, a teacher, literally mentoring in that I took radio classes from the one and only Bob Rivers at Green River College as part of the broadcast journalism program, KGRG, which is something that Bob was very instrumental in. He and his wife Lisa funded a scholarship, was very much supportive of the program. And one of the things that we'll talk about is how Bob was really into teaching, educating, and more than that, innovation and the future. Like this dude was always looking ahead. But where these paths kind of intersect is that when I was a kid, Bob Rivers came to KISW in 1989. I was 11 years old. So right in the wheelhouse. That's actually like the perfect age to jump onto that style of talk rock radio. Twisted tunes and, kind of like irreverent sense of humor, but still also nice, friendly, edgy, but family friendly, that type of thing. But I eventually kind of aged out, kind of grew out of it a bit. And in 1998, a friend of mine from work recommended this radio station, this outrageous talk radio station. And it started with the Tom Leykis show in the afternoon, but later on, they got a midday host by the name of BJ Shea, and there was no going back after that. because like I got so into the show and the culture and the entire radio station and all that. And for me, BJ is a iconic, monumental, influential figure for me because basically he told me that you can talk about nerdy geeky stuff on the radio and let your flag fly at a time where nerd culture was not yet pop culture. Like you would still get hassled for liking comics and watching nerdy movies. But I digress. Basically, like that's where my interest took me, and that's kind of what put me on the trajectory to where I'm at today. Because like I knew I wanted to be in the radio industry, inspired by that. Years and years later, I would find myself at Green River College taking broadcast radio classes, and Bob Rivers was teaching classes. He was teaching news writing and production and a couple other classes. Podcasting. He was teaching a podcasting class. And a couple different times, he would invite BJ Shea to come and guest lecture in classes. And all of those days, I remember I was just like pins and needles, just anxious about BJ coming. This is going to be so exciting. And I was going through my memories and I found a photo. In fact, I asked Bob, I'm like, do you think we could ask BJ to get a picture with us? And Bob texted me and he's like, he would love that, in just a very friendly, Bob-like tone. But anyway, I was just looking at that picture the other day, and that to me that's kind of like an intersection point where like my education crossed paths with my influence, a motivation type of thing, and kind of crossed from there. I could talk about more about Bob and his teaching capacity and things in KTRG stuff, but I feel like I'm hogging the mic a little bit here. I would BJ, like I said, that's kind of where things intersect for me. Like I was a fan of yours. I was a lapsed fan of Bob, but Bob became something more transcendent to me. Like I'm seeing these tributes, like in the Seattle Times and KSW did a lovely show yesterday that you had the opportunity to be a part of. But like for me, he was literally my teacher, and I was driving to work on Tuesday, and the feeling that I had, the sadness was that like that feeling you have when like you realize like one of your elementary school teachers had passed away, and I'm like, well, no, that's literally what the feeling was because he was literally my teacher. So that's kind of like a bit of my relationship with Bob. But Bob had the opportunity to mentor and nurture several different generations of Seattle broadcast. Um, and BJ was one of them. So I thought we would just talk about our friend Bob. So I'm gonna shut up for a second just to let you go.
Well, I have that same issue, so I surely can't throw stones. I tend to go on because we love to talk. That's why we do what we do. That's why we're in front of these microphones with these crazy hours, working for way too little money. But you got a love for it. And yeah, Bob, you're lucky to have a 10-year span in this industry. Where if you're in a city and for the 10-year span, you're a very successful show where you're relevant and you're the thing. And, for so much of Bob's career, that was the case. I think that he had many more than 10 years where he was the thing, the hot show, Twisted Tunes, which, Atlantic Records. He had I don't know any radio guy, that had a record deal as long and as successful as Bob Rivers. I'm sure there's some out there, but Bob was the one that I knew with Twisted Tunes. His career, by my standards, is a Hall of Fame career, and he is in the Hall of Fame. And, of course, goes in as the whole show, has the whole show out there, celebrate. That's just the guy he was. He was the orchestrator, such a great recognizer of talent. Man, that guy could just see things in people, and he would just meet you and go, you know what, you'd be good at A, B, C, D, and E. I was on a radio show, Mike, honoring him yesterday. a couple of guys that have a great show, Dwyer's and Michaels,
Hmm.
and they thought I worked with him. They were like, "Wow, we thought you worked. You guys were you never worked together." And I said, "No." He always said, "You're a host. I can't work with you. Like I need people that are going to be sidekicks, people that are going to know how to, go with my flow." He said, "That's not you. You will never be that guy. You are a leader." And at the time he told me this, I was a sidekick on somebody else's show. And he was like, "You need to get your own show. There's no way. It's just not going to work for you. You have to be the leader. You have to be the guy." He saw that in me, maybe more than I saw that in me. And he just had that innate ability to recognize talent and know exactly where they belong. Such an orchestrator, such a
Hmm.
band leader. Just one of the many great qualities that Bob had. And because of it, because I never worked with him, there was this sort of confidant relationship because he really couldn't confide so much in a lot of the people he worked with. I mean, he had great relationships with everybody, but when you're like the lead of a show, and let's say you're having problems with management in your building or what, sometimes you just can't say the things because you're the leader. You just you have to toe a certain line. It really displays certain qualities to be a leader, and Bob was always great in the building like that. And me, I was the exact opposite. And so I think I was a guilty pleasure in his life, like where he didn't have to be perfect. He could complain. He could say what he really felt about management that he was working with at the time that he would never say in public, or like his crazy friend BJ would say on air. He would just never do that.
Hmm.
And he loved that about me, even though that was something he would never do. But he loved that about me. And there was some osmosis. And I remember him saying, "BJ, you're a great talent. You're courageous, but I need to teach you how to play well with others." And I really appreciated that because he told me what he could learn from me and then said, "And I believe you can learn something from me." So he's like, "This will be a really good relationship." And it was for over 30 years. And I'm in a celebratory mood. I mean, there's a lot, the sadness happened when I knew that he had cancer that he wasn't going to come back from.
Right.
And when he got his diagnosis 3 years ago, his one of his lines was, "This isn't an if, this is a when." And at that point, boy, there was those were the moments where I was going through just a lot, going like, wow, he could be gone in 6 months. That was the original prognosis. But knowing Bob, he's like, "No, I'm going to stay on air as long as possible."
Yeah.
And he did. Um, but every moment then I really just became in service to him. He was in service to me his entire life as far as I'm concerned. He said he got a lot from me. I hope that's true. I feel like I got way more from him, but once I learned about this, I thought, okay, I'm going to do whatever I can to bring joy and something or whatever he wanted in his life. He never really wanted to talk about the diagnosis a whole lot. He would clerically, because sometimes I would have to say, I go, "Bob, I'm your friend. I want to know what's going on with you."
Yeah.
I said, "I've taken all this therapy, and they teach you to be empathetic and listen. So give me this opportunity to be a better human being." But he's like, "I don't want to talk about me. I know, And so it
Yeah.
was a fun back and forth. But I feel that in the last 3 years, whenever we got together and we got to spend, our thing was radio. So we would go, like the last couple of years, we'd go to this morning show convention and we would spend time together because he wasn't working anymore. I made sure, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be with this guy for the entire convention. Normally I would do some other things, but it's like, this is where I met my friend. This is where I first met him. This is where he came
Yeah.
up to me and changed my life. So I know how much he loved that convention, loved the business. And so many great stories, Mike. I mean, you've got a lot of things, a lot of questions, but oh my God, so many fun stories about what a great human being he was, and his legacy through all of us, like you and me, lives on.
Mhm. Absolutely. Well, so let's start there. Like I said, I kind of wanted to start in the middle and then kind of go
Yeah,
back to the beginning from there because without Bob Rivers, there's no BJ Shea in Seattle. And
No.
if there's no BJ Shea in Seattle, then there's no Mike Seibert gets the inspiration to want to pursue radio, and then he doesn't meet Bob Rivers. So that's a sliding doors alternate 1985 that I don't want to live in. That kind of thing. It's like the bad timeline when they go back and Back to the Future Part Two, that kind of thing. But I thought let's maybe start there because I think it's a terrific story about how you and Bob met at boot camp, and then how he basically got you the gig that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, boot camp, morning show boot camp is a convention for radio personalities. Much love to Don Anthony, a radio guy himself, who thought there's so many conventions in radio. Why don't we have one for talent and morning talent? And so over 30 years ago, Don put this convention together, and I went with another great mentor of mine, Brother Weeze, who's also a Hall of Fame broadcaster who has a terrific show and could have been anywhere, but he loved his hometown of Rochester, New York, and just never wanted to leave there, and owns that town. And I was so fortunate to work with him. That's the thing, Mike. Man, I just have been so fortunate to have people take a shining to me who were much more talented than I am, much more accomplished than I am. And so it was because of working with Brother Weeze, and Weeze saying, I want to go to this convention. And that this little show from Rochester goes with all these big people. And what happened, and this is, you talk about serendipity. A week before, I'm a big baseball fan and from Boston originally, so a big Red Sox fan. I go to the old Cleveland Municipal Stadium to watch the former Indians take on the Red Sox, and I go with a friend, and because it was an easy drive from Rochester to go to Cleveland. I go there. I don't know. This stadium is so ratchet that I catch a rash. Whether it be from the toilets, I don't know. But Mike, I'm on the way home from the game, and I am getting an itch in a very, very awkward and uncomfortable place. And I have to stop, and I have to get cream and everything, but it doesn't go away. So I go to the doctor, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we've got to give you a steroid cream because this rash is out of control." And it's a steroid cream. And what the doctor didn't tell me, which we all know now, is this cream's going to ramp you up and make you very aggressive.
Right.
So this is the week I'm going to this radio convention with my other mentor Weeze, and I am just like full of piss and vinegar. And people are saying things. There's a lot of not so nice people just pounding their chest, bragging about all they're doing. And I think we have a really good show in Rochester. And eventually people are just saying this and that and the other thing, and I just stand up and I just start going crazy on people. And I just get up in the middle of this convention and go, blah, 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 and Bob notices, like, who is this crazy person? And then Weeze was on some panels and featured, and he was fantastic on panels. So the two of us created this crazy stir where Bob was like, who are these whack jobs from Rochester, New York? But he found us very captivating. And that was the one thing that Bob was he was curious. He wasn't a radio personality that was threatened by other talented people. He wanted to learn. He was like, wow, I do my show this way, but what could these two crazy people from Rochester be like? And he was really infatuated with me because I had qualities he didn't have. He thought I was very courageous. We were in Atlanta, I think, for this convention. And we had gone into this neighborhood, and it was a predominantly African-American neighborhood. And Bob and we just went in to get some food. Bob was a little nervous. He's like, wow, I just feel like I don't blend here. He's just like, I feel, because he felt like I stand out. Meanwhile, I am just having comfortable conversations. I'm cracking jokes. I was saying some things that's getting the whole place to laugh at this place we were eating at. And he was like, how are you so courageous to go do this? And that was like one of our, once he had met me and we would go out, he was just, that's the way he was. He was like, I need to learn this from you.
Mhm.
And that wasn't our first meeting, of course, but our first meeting was because of the fact that he was in recovery. I wasn't a big drinker. And this was, the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
Everybody was partying, bright lights, big city, all sorts of stuff was going on. I mean, there were very popular radio personalities at this convention, and those very popular radio personalities were doing rock and roll things. And Bob was like, I'm staying away from that. I'm in recovery. And he was like, where am I going to go? Like everybody was going to party. And here's Bob, like, where am I going to go?
Mhm.
And somebody had told, and somebody told him, he said, hey, that crazy guy, I hear he's a big Star Trek fan. And Bob's like, I like Star Trek and I haven't seen the movie yet. There's the new movie out. So I'll never forget this. I'm just sitting there being me. Bob Rivers is like this luminary, and he taps me on the shoulder. I turn around, and I'm like, and the first thing I'm like, holy crap, you're Bob Rivers. He's like, yes, I know. And I'm a nobody. I really
Right.
am a nobody who's hopped up on steroids, and so I'm really trying not to lose it because, Mike, I'm a fanboy as well. I mean, he was
Right.
one of the guys that I had hoped I could even be kind of like someday. And he said, I hear you like Star Trek. And I'm at this point, being a geek is not that cool in the late 80s, early 90s. And I'm like, wait, did you, what? You're Bob Rivers, and now you're asking me about Star Trek? And of course, I'm a huge Star Trek fan. So I'm like, yeah, and so he's like, would you like to go to the movie with me? And what I said yesterday on the show is like, in my mind, I'm like, I'll let you parade me up and down the streets of New Orleans naked as long as I get to hang out with you. I don't care. Like, yeah,
Right.
let's go. And it was then that this wonderful friendship started, because Bob was different. He had all this fame, he had all this success, but he really didn't live the lifestyle of that. He was in recovery, so maybe 20 years previous, maybe he would have done that. I don't know, but he was more about the craft. He became addicted to the craft, which
Yeah.
a lot of folks do that when they're in recovery. They've got to find something else to really hyper focus on. And so for Bob, he was like, well, that's easy. With his Twisted Tunes and his radio career, he became such a student and a lover of the industry. And then his passion to find great people and make the industry better by getting those great people in the right places. Um, he got me so many jobs.
Mhm.
When he worked for Nationwide Insurance, why they own radio stations, I'll never know, because you're an insurance company, and sometimes radio stations do some really silly, crazy things that's not going to
Yeah.
look good for your insurance company. And he, he got me a job at Nationwide in Phoenix,
Mhm.
and so his clout and how he used his clout for good was so amazing. And you talk about me not being, I wouldn't be anywhere. It was just every time anything happened, usually because I shot myself in the foot, Bob would be there to go, he's a great talent. And he would defend me. And he also was the one that introduced me to Paul Anderson, who is probably one of the greatest agents out there. But I
Yeah.
was,
Agent to the Stars. Yeah.
yeah, I was his first client. And it was only because Bob had done a record deal with Paul. And Paul was a young, starting out, he had had a lot of success as a lawyer here in Seattle. But Paul was also intrigued with this radio business of yours. And Paul realized that he was elevated. He was a lot more qualified and, frankly, bigger than the radio industry as far as how he conducted his business. And so Paul saw a great opportunity. He's like, there's a great opportunity here. Your business should have better representation. And Bob was like, oh yeah, you're right. And so Paul's like, I'm going to start this, and you can be my first client. And Bob was like, I'll tell you what, let me see how you are with another guy. If you can manage this other guy, then I know you're going to be a great agent. And Paul's like, yeah, give me anybody. And so he gave him me. And right off the bat, he negotiated my deal to come to Seattle. And then 3 months in, I had a massive problem, and the company had a problem with me. And it was an 8-month legal battle for me to get it all worked out with the company. So right off the bat, I really put Paul through his paces. But that
Mhm.
showed Bob, hey, you know what? You can represent me.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. A couple different other sliding doors, spurs. Split off timelines. I'd like to talk about. So we talked about Bob coming to Seattle in 1989 at KISW. It's there that he meets a cat named Jim Campy,
Hmm.
who is his news guy, basically. And Campy is the guy who is most directly responsible for helping get Bob get the help that he needed, and was instrumental in his sobriety and recovery. And when I was kind of sharing some of my unorganized raw thoughts the other night on the live stream, I kind of like skirted by that because it's like I didn't know Campy. He passed away the year before I started at Green River, and but his presence kind of loomed large. Like the students that were already enrolled ahead of me and the staff, it kind of you felt it. It's like you felt the raw nerve. So it was odd and awkward sometimes, kind of coming into that as a brand new, fresh eyed. Oh, hey, I'm going to learn about radio. This is going to be awesome. But yeah, it's like so Bob uh, credits Campy for a lot of things, kind of keeping him on the straight and narrow and the path that he ultimately found for himself. Campy would go on to teach classes at Green River College, and that's where that comes in, where like he would ask Bob to substitute teach for him when he would take vacations, or he would bring in him as a guest speaker. So years later, again, he Bob, after his time at his last radio gig, had time on his hands, and kind of had the opportunity to reignite his passion through teaching, coaching, and mentoring. BJ, this dude always had his eye on the future, and he's always talking about, like, he loved radio, but he was always interested in like the innovation in technology, and like, podcasting and social media, and what's the next thing, so even like after my time at KGRG had finished, and I grew up and got my commercial radio gig that I enjoy today. Bob went on and like did his own podcast and did live streaming, did like all kinds of stuff. So he was always on that forefront of innovation. But I had mentioned many times that like Bob was a mentor figure to me, in that like he literally taught me. And I was thinking of like a couple things that resonated with me. Um, he taught a news writing class, and in that he's talking about like interviewing techniques. And one thing, and I didn't realize this until I was actually going to use this on you, BJ, when I was going to ask you for more details. Um, Bob Rivers taught me three powerful words that any fans of my show know I say this at some point during any interviews. Tell me more. It's like anytime there is a spot where there's like a lull, or like you don't know what to do next. Tell me more. It'd be like, well, it's like this was tell me more. Or even using that as a pivot point. Tell me more. That kind of thing. And I use that today. That it's like it's something that really stuck with me. He also taught me a lot about radio production, and I remember I'll drop the audio here if I can find it. We ran a promotion, or a promo that ran on KGRG FM as a commercial for his production class. And basically, what the project was, we would take Killer Queen by Queen, and he gave us like all the stems, like all of the like. There's 24 individual tracks of that song. It's a beast. Like the Triangle Strike has its own unique track, and like you have to build it like a puzzle. But Bob had such a gentle and friendly manner of speaking, and I can almost remember the spot verbatim. He's like, create multi-track masterpiece at Green River College, that kind of thing. So that just little phrases like that always stuck with me. He was a terrific teacher, and always took a particular interest in, ironically enough, the non-radio students. Like we had like a huge contingent of international students that went through those classes, because like those classes overlapped with other degree paths like journalism, communications, things like that. So like you would have to fulfill like a certain amount of like communications courses credit. But Bob was always so great with younger students, international kids. He was terrific with us radio kids, but like he took a specific shine to the to like the non-traditional students, and really I could see that sparking his curiosity. He always liked to just talk and teach. That's one of the things that always sticks with me about Bob. But BJ, I wanted to ask you, I we were talking about Star Trek earlier, and a story I was hoping that you were going to get to tell on the radio show yesterday on KSW, but time didn't permit. That's not the only time that you and Bob had the opportunity to have a Star Trek experience, if you will. I was wondering if you could talk about some of those stories. If you don't know what I mean, I could tell you.
I think you're talking. I imagine you're talking about the fact that Bob and I were in competition
Yes.
to be on Star Trek Enterprise, and at the time I was doing the midday show in town, and Bob was doing the morning show. So the fact that I thought that I would have a chance, because Bob was at the top of his game at the time, just killer ratings. Our show was doing well too in the middays, but middays is usually not as glamorous or as lucrative as a morning show can be. And yet Paramount said, hey, we've got this thing. We want to really, call attention to this new show. We have Star Trek Enterprise. And at the time it was just Enterprise, because why put Star Trek on the name of a show? Why we wouldn't want the fans to think we actually like the show. And one of the worst intros to any Star Trek or any science fiction show ever. It's been a long time. It's already been a long time. Get this off. But we were in competition to get a walk-on. One of those things where you're one of the people in the background. And Bob, of course, he ran a contest. He ended up, taking a listener with him, and then she ended up having a wonderful life and really being ensconced in the world of Star Trek online and doing a lot of cool stuff digitally, all because of the fact that he gave her this opportunity. And it really, so he created something amazing for somebody. But yeah, I lost out, man. It was always a friendly competition. He and I, being the Star Trek fans, being up for it. And he did get the part, rightly so, because his morning show was very, very successful. But second prize wasn't bad, because Paramount was like, wow, we really feel bad. And I to this day think Bob said, look, you got to do something for my friend. Mm-hmm. It's like, I can't do this for you if you don't do something for my friend. I really believe that's the kind of guy he is. He never, ever said that to me. But that's the story I'm going to tell in my head, is that because there's no reason for them to have thrown me any bone. But They were like, hey, we got this brand new Star Trek experience, which was basically like a theme ride at the Hilton in Vegas. Yeah. And they were like, hey, would you like to come down and broadcast live from there as a second prize? Which I was like, yeah. Mm-hmm. And that was a wonderful experience. Granted, it would have been great to be on Star Trek Enterprise, but to be able to do a show live from there, in near Quark's bar that they had made, for folks that know Star Trek Deep Space Nine, they had really created elaborate sets and an elaborate ride, and it was a fantastic experience at the Star Trek Experience before, of course, they dismantled it. And I truly believe that was because Bob said, you got to do something for this guy. He can't just lose and get nothing. And I knew Bob knew, like, even though it was like, Bob, I'm going to go hard but I think he knew, was like, dude, come on, I'm on a morning show, you're doing a midday show. But that I would not be surprised. He was that kind of guy to make sure that everybody won. He was just that kind of guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I didn't remember this until I actually did the research. I first of all, I remember that live broadcast from Vegas. And incidentally, BJ, I don't know if you've been back to what used to be the Hilton. They've changed ownerships like 3 or 4 times, but like most of the decorations, like the wall stuff, all of that stuff is still there. So
Whoa. Oh,
so
I'll have to
like
go in that building. I didn't realize that.
all of it's still there. So like even like the terminal for the monorail is still has like the same sign like in Star Trek font. Like they it must have been prohibitively expensive to take all that stuff out because everything is still there. I think they do like timeshares now or something like that kind of thing. But it's so odd. Like all like the Quartz Bar stuff is still there. Like all of like the names and stuff has obviously been taken out, but like the stuff that was like built into the walls and the landscape of it. It
Oh,
kind of
that's
it's a
I got to go
weird
check that
oddity.
out. Yeah, I got to check that out. I did not realize they didn't gut the place. That's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, the ride and all that other stuff is long since gone. But I didn't realize this until I did the research. But Bob was actually in 2 different episodes of Enterprise. First was the one we were talking about for the contest back in 2004. So Bob was in the episode Zero Hour alongside the contest winner as the Starfleet's oldest ensign.
Yes.
Because Bob had a very distinctive shock of white hair. Like so, it's like I just watched that last night, and you could see him plain as day. He very much sticks out.
And that
But
was a concern. He always told a great story about how they were like, what are we going to do with this guy? We don't have anybody this old on Star Trek except like Picard or something.
right. But apparently, he also appears as a lieutenant in the finale. These are the voyages, which I did not know.
I
So
didn't
now I
know that
want.
either.
I don't know where he shows up, but now I kind of want to take a look at that.
Yeah, that was the last episode that nobody liked, right? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, where
Yeah.
it was all the entire series was a holodeck simulation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
real Dallas situation there.
Every once in a
Unfortunately.
while, you see, it makes me feel good about being a radio guy. Is every once in a while you see Hollywood trip and fall on their face. So hey, you know what? Yeah, nobody's perfect.
Absolutely. So we are hanging out with our guest, the one and only BJ Shea, Seattle radio legend, talking about broadcasting icon, our friend and mentor, Bob Rivers. And I wanted to share a couple things that I came across on Facebook. First of all, there for Bob, there will be they're having a private memorial service on Friday in Claremont, New Hampshire. I don't know what New Hampshire means to Bob. Is that where they currently live? I thought they were in Vermont for the maple syrup stuff.
well, they moved to Vermont, to because they love New England because that's where they're from. If I'm
Right.
not mistaken, where they ended up, and this is a sweet story, and I don't think Lisa will mind me telling this. Lisa met Bob where they currently are. So I
Sure.
think that I think it was New Hampshire, and I could be wrong about the exact location, but that was very key when they knew that there was nothing more they could do for Bob. And and Bob said, well, we can go back to Vegas. We can do, and Lisa said, I would like to go and spend our final days together where we met. And
Oh,
so that was a real, so that was the key to where that location, where they are now. And that was very sweet when I talked to Lisa yesterday.
hmm
That was a really sweet thing to hear. She's been a rock star. I communicated with Bob's son Andrew on Facebook, and of
hmm
course, it's a tough time, and I don't like to bother people. So I even waited to call Lisa, and I thought, well, she can always let it go to voicemail. I don't, it's a tough time. I want people to know I love them, but at the same time, being this socially awkward guy that I am, it's like I also don't want to make things worse.
Right.
But I eventually, did at least call her. But I left the kids. I figured the kids were, dealing with it however you would expect kids to be dealing with something like this.
hmm
But Andrew had said, my mom has been amazing. She's been a rock star. And usually people who are solid like that, will at some point eventually get to go and find somebody in their lives where they get to sort of then grieve and feel all of it. That's just how it goes. Usually somebody is always the rock star whenever, whenever something like this happens.
Yeah. Absolutely, and there will be a public memorial in Seattle at a later date to be announced. So once we find out those details,
It's
we will
yeah.
share that.
And I'll tell you this, Paul Anderson, Agent to the Stars. Hopefully, he doesn't hate me for this. He is going to be spearheading that, which means, he loved that man so much. So
Yeah,
it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful time, and I look forward to going to that because
yeah,
I know so many people here in this area want to celebrate the great life. And really celebratory is what I would like to be. I
yeah,
love the day. I love the Day of the Dead concept and the idea of how that culture celebrates when somebody passes. I think America, we're kind of stunted in that department. And yes, it's a sad moment to lose somebody, but my gosh, it's also a great time to celebrate and remember why we love that person and to
yeah.
laugh and to revel and to do all of that. And I think we've lost that a bit in this country. And so I'm hoping that Bob's ceremonial memorial service, whatever comes up that we have here, will really have that vibe. I know I want to bring that vibe to that. They may kick me out, but what are you going to do? Bob wouldn't be surprised.
Well, yeah, I mean, Bob was always just such an easygoing guy, like even keel at all times. Like the only time I think I've ever seen Bob even remotely upset, and he's still kind of like kind of had it on simmer, is when anybody brings up the barefoot bandit. And the less said about that, the better. If you know, you know. But that was always a topic that Bob was always just a little twitchy about. It's like you would sometimes he would go on, other times not so much. But still, that was like the only time in my personal history that I saw him get just like 1 degree above even keel, that kind of thing.
Yeah, he was very good like that. And I think they say opposites attract. Everything he was, I wasn't, and I really feel like but he made you feel good about you being you. I mean, that's the interesting thing is that there were so many things about him that I wasn't, and so at times I'd be like, I don't know why you're hanging out with me, but he genuinely made you feel like he enjoyed your company. Like to be able to be around a human being where you don't have to worry about how you be, you're accepted, is one of the rarest gifts that a human can give another human. And boy, he gave that all the time. He was like that all the time. I was nothing like him, and I was such a pain in the ass. And I just couldn't believe he would take every call. I always had so much drama. I always had so many battles with management. And and he knew that about me, and he was patient and listened and never made me feel like I was an inconvenience, which I don't understand how any human being could be like that. But like you said, even keeled and kind and compassionate, and I just I don't know how I could be his friend. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know why. I don't know what you're getting from this, Bob. I really don't
Right,
know.
right. I think he just likes people. You know what I mean? It's just like because like I think maybe that's why he felt so comfortable in the uh, college radio sphere, where it's like dealing with people of like different ages, international kids, radio nerds, that kind of stuff, and radio kids of all ages. I mean, it's like I was 35 years old when I was taking those classes, that kind of thing. My beard used to be a whole lot darker than it is now, but still, yeah, Bob was always just a welcoming and collaborative, and he loved ideas. He loved creative ideas. He loved brainstorming. Like half of the time, we would just like sit in class like in a circle and just like chat, like we're just BSing around the fire, just like spitballing ideas. He was so creative and collaborative and curious and quirky. He was always fun to be around.
I have a couple of great stories, or at least one great story with two radio personalities at the morning convention we go to. They're two great radio talents, Dana Cortez and Ricky Sanchez. Dana is a syndicated radio personality, and boy, she's just terrific. And Ricky Sanchez, he used to work on the Elvis Duran show, and now she's a host of her own show in Nashville. So because of Bob, he taught me that you go to these conventions, you don't go to party with all your old buddies. You really should go and pay it forward to the younger talent who would love to be able to talk to somebody who's had the years of experience. So I became really good friends with Dana and Ricky, and I remember like last year at the convention, because this I think was the first convention where they got to honor Bob for being in the Hall of Fame. So I remember Dana coming up to me and she said, "You know something? I never like talking to old people, and especially old white guys, And she's like, she's just like, because they always mansplain you, they tell you what to do. And she said, I just had this delightful conversation with this old man who used to be in radio, and he was really so kind and so nice. And she said, and he listened. Who listens? What man ever listens? Dana was just so funny about that. And then Ricky, honest to gosh, Ricky, it just seemed like right off the bat said, BJ, I think I met a friend of yours, is Bob something. But he was so kind and he was so sweet. So then they were telling me this right before we were going into the ceremony to honor Bob. And so then we go on there, and Don Anthony gets up there, who runs the convention, says, this is a special year because one of the people here has just been inducted into the Hall of Fame as one of the greatest radio talents ever. And I'd like to bring up somebody to bring him up. So he had me intro Bob. And so I get up there and go, ladies and gentlemen, please, my friend Bob Rivers. And I saw both of them in the crowd gasp like, oh my God. And they came up to me after me, holy crap, that's the guy I was talking to. He's so nice. I had no idea he was the king. Oh, I feel like such an idiot. But that's who he was. Like, he was so unassuming that he didn't go, oh, by the way, guess who I am? They had no clue. And he spent so much time with them. And like, Dana had tears in her eyes. She was like, I cannot believe how kind he was. And he's a legend. She's like, we all heard of him. I didn't know that's who that was. Yeah. And that's how he functioned in the world. He didn't go around saying, here's who I am. Don't you know who I am? And, Mike, you and I have seen enough radio personalities that pull that crap all the time, going into restaurants or whatever, trying to get free stuff. And that was just how delightful he was. And that was just last year, where, up until the end. I mean, he was struggling then, trying to get around because he was getting his treatments, and still just a ray of sunshine and a beacon in young broadcasters' lives. That's what he loved to do. And man, it was so fun. That was such a fun experience because my two friends were like, oh my God, they were so happy. They were so happy that somebody of his stature took time to recognize and see them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I want to call attention to my buddy Gordo in the chat. Also a KGRG kid. Bob just had a way of understanding everyone. He could empathize with anyone, and I think that is so brilliantly said.
Yeah, Gordo is another great success story. You take a look. You really, another thing you can judge somebody by is like, how many radio people did he create? Like, how many success stories happened because of Bob Rivers? And Gordo is definitely one of them. Gordo is in this business, loved this business, and was like, one of Bob's guys, one of the guys that Bob said, hey man, why don't you be in this business? You should be in this business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's that's kind of like an interesting intertwined side legacy in itself. Cause like on my podcast a lot, because it's a personal attachment for me, I talk a lot about the legacy of KGRG, and Bob is a part of that family. So like when I talk to you, when I talk to others, that's what Bob is to me. It's like, he's an extension of that family. But Bob meant so many things to so many people. BJ, I had commented on the initial video that you had shared, and you were like really raw and really vulnerable. And it takes a lot to put yourself out like that. But I had commented and said like I'm absolutely heartbroken, but it just goes to show the influence that Bob had on folks on both sides of the speaker. Because like, there are folks that like myself, at like, age 10, 11, grew up listening to Bob and were lifelong fans, followed Bob from, KISW to KZOK to KJR and beyond. And so I know those fans are hurting as well. I mean, like, we could talk about it as like, insiders and stuff, but still it's like when somebody that you idolize, that you look up to, that you're inspired by, that you're motivated by, when they take the pass, it hurts, even if you didn't know them personally. Now, we had the honor of knowing Bob, but there's, again, that other people's grief is no less valid in this situation, because Bob touched so many people across so many generations.
Yeah, and that's in our industry, unfortunately, it just doesn't do a good enough job recognizing what these talent mean to the people who made them a part of their daily routine. And obviously now with social media and all sorts of things on the internet and apps and everything, and Twitch and TikTok and all of it, yes, there's so many different places that people go to get entertained. And before all that happened, in the 90s and in the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s, man, it was people like Bob Rivers that everyone just had waking up to every day to get their news, to get their entertainment, to get their fun, to get them motivated to go do their job. And also, there was so much that people learned from somebody like Bob, Spike, and Joe, where they shared their lives and they were vulnerable, and it meant something to those folks that spent that time with them. And our industry doesn't do a great job when all of a sudden that person's no longer there. And I've been very honest about it and frank about it, and because now that I'm retired, I can say what I damn well please about what I'm unhappy with about the radio industry. And I even called for, I said, we have the National Association of Broadcasters and other organizations, the RAB, and I'm like, you guys are you guys just like the Rob Manfreds of this, or can you actually go to the owners and tell them to get their S together and be more respectful of the people they make money off of, which are the listeners? Because these people are heartbroken when somebody leaves the radio. And when Bob left, and retired, I knew that was a void. And even though we had much different shows, I told everybody on my show at the time, I said, if you happen to tune in and you miss Bob, we're not the same thing, but we get what you're going through. And that's important. It is so important for the listeners, like you said, because Bob meant so much to them. Bob was, I mean, my God, I mean, he was a gigantic figure in this town, and so many people loved him. And I just, yeah, you're right, Mike. It's so hard for a lot of those people. And I was happy that KISW dedicated the whole morning show to him. But Steve and Taryn are quality people. They're folks that I worked with for years. That station is magical. No matter what happens in the world of corporate entertainment and everything, and KISW just does what they think is right. It's very difficult to do these days because a lot of people are not courageous to do that. They just have to, toe the company line. KISW, the people that work there are just class through and through. And I'm happy they did that because that was so good for the listeners to have a place to go. I personally think almost every radio station in town could have done something. There's a certain radio station that I know that could have done something, and I have no idea what they really did, but they didn't do any. I don't think they did anything. I'm not going to throw stones, though I'm very angry because he has a legacy on multiple stations in this market. And I know that Jody over at the Jet was kind and said some things because Jody used to work for Bob and with Bob. And so I know that happened. But I think every station could have done something, said something, and really, Spike, of course, over at Cairo was very kind and had beautiful stuff over there. So those exceptions, I'm happy about, and KISW. But I feel badly for, like you said, for listeners when people go away and nobody says anything. And it's like, you've asked them to invest their time and then you just dump them. It's like, no, radio, you've got to be better than that. And I don't care about the bottom line. I don't care about you pretending that you are now still qualified to be a Wall Street business, which I don't think radio is. Radio needs to get the message. You're no longer a Wall Street business. You're just not. And stop pretending you are. And maybe you could actually get back to making money again. But and it's because of the way they treat people. And that includes the listeners. And that's why I'm happy, Mike, that, that at least you and I and everybody can give the right kind of attention to the people who are grieving, who are sad that a big part of their life is gone. And we're right there with you,
Mm-hmm.
because it isn't just like my friend. I know what he did. I know how amazing he was, the contributions he made. And there's so many contributions that people don't know that he made, because he just wasn't that kind of guy. He didn't go out there and go, here's what I'm doing.
Right. Right.
He's just, yeah. So I'm happy we get to do this, Mike. And
Yeah.
I wish radio was a little better about these kind of moments for the listeners' sake. My God, we made our livings. He and I were both able to have a life and raise our children because of the great people that listen to us. And then for our companies to just dismiss that is just
Yeah.
wrong. It's just freaking wrong. It really, really is. But I'm happy we get to do it, because,
Yeah.
man, the listeners are great, great people. They make our lives, and he loved them. That's the other thing. He had such a great love for the people that loved him.
Absolutely. And to kick off from that as well, BJ, as we get closer to wrapping up, that that reminds me of a sequence in Deadpool and Wolverine,
Oh,
where
yeah.
Elektra and Blade and Gambit, spoiler alert, they Elektra has this thing. It's like, we finally get the thing that we never had, an ending. And I that hit me harder than it was probably intended to. But I've been in the business now long enough to where I've seen enough of my friends come and go, and very rarely do we have the opportunity to go out on our own terms, but also have the opportunity to say goodbye to the audience and to actually have that ending. I've been privileged to where I've been a part of very ceremonious endings. Longtime hosts retiring, they get to have a last show, they get to do the victory lap. But I've also seen it where that's not the case. Where, like, I remember a time I went to work and suddenly people are just not there, and you're just reeling until you can get to your desk and open up your email, and maybe they've let you know. Even then, not always. It's like, oh, that person's office has been empty for 3 days. I wonder if they're coming back. But also probably not. It would be nice to be notified. That kind of thing. So it's like it's on both sides of the speaker, both sides of the office, and it really sucks. So I was one. I'm grateful that you took me up on my invitation to do this kind of more long form, because, like,
Anytime.
podcasting is so fun, dude. It's like, you talk live without a net, and just let it fly, and you don't have to worry about traffic or weather or news or any of that other kind of stuff. But before we close out, I do want to call attention to a couple things that have been shared to the Bob Rivers page on Facebook. First of all, this post from the Bob Rivers show account, in honor of Bob Rivers. I'm just reading from the post. In honor of Bob Rivers, for those who have asked about sending flowers, Bob's wishes were that instead, those who want to honor his memory, please consider donating to Black River Innovation Campus. BRIC was close to his heart, supporting innovation and creativity, values that Bob championed throughout his life, and something that we talked about here pretty extensively. Your generosity will help continue the kind of forward thinking spirit that Bob always believed in. And I will throw a link there in the chat if you would be interested in checking that out. But then also, I also wanted to call attention to, also from the Bob Rivers page, David Lee, who is Bob's web guy, does a lot of, like, his social posting, maintains his website, maintains his blog. And actually, just a tangent for a sec, BJ, one of the things that why this kind of hit me harder when I saw the news on Tuesday is, like, Bob had just put up a blog post talking about, like, his outlook on life, and his philosophy on things, and the reality of his diagnosis. one of the things when I shared the news with my wife, I kind of, I was melancholy, and I said, the thing that you take for granted when somebody shares that they have a terminal disease, that it's a terminal disease. And I had lost track of that. Like, Bob had just posted like a live stream video on his Facebook, talking about like the batch of the new maple syrup that they were working on there. And even though you could tell that, he was going through his treatments and having a harder time getting around, he still had that smile. He still had that zest for life. He was at at the same time, um, at peace with his diagnosis and what that meant, but also he wasn't ready either. It's like it was both things at the same time. And I would hope when we all get to that phase in our life that we could have a similar attitude where it's like, I'm at peace, but I still want to be here. And I mean, that kind of thing. But I wanted to call attention to this Facebook post. Um, by now, most have all heard about Bob's passing. As Bob's behind the scenes web guy, I thought it would be appropriate to create a post on his blog to provide a persistent space for those who would like to share thoughts, experiences, and greatest memories of Bob. Feel free to chime in, and he puts a link, and again, I'll reshare this in the chat as well. I've also dedicated the homepage at bobrivers.com to anyone who would like to leave a note for Bob. So Bob's legacy will still be available to us. There are folks in place, and I BJ, I don't remember if it was you or Steve or Taryn, but on KSW yesterday, one of the three of you had said, like, one of the comforting things about Bob being gone, that he left such a legacy and so much material. Like you could just turn on the radio and you can hear Bob Rivers. You could listen to Twisted Tunes anytime. Like I've been listening to my Twisted Tunes box set pretty much on repeat. So there's material of Bob that's available. I just listened to a panel show with Bob where he hosted Charlie Harger, who is now the morning show host over at Cairo News Radio, along with John Kasprick and Tom Evans Krause from KGRG, and they kind of talked about the legacy of that station. So it's a time capsule that the onion cutting ninjas were out when I was listening to that one, because they talked about Campy, they also talked about Bob and the legacy of KGRG. So it was like right in that wheelhouse for me. But BJ, as we get ready to part ways, what if you were to suggest material for folks to check out, whether it be Twisted Tunes or like favorite radio bits, what I guess I should have said this an hour ago. Every podcast is somebody's first podcast, but like, if folks listening to this might not be as familiar with Bob and his legacy, what would you kind of steer folks towards to check out, to kind of get to know the Bob we knew better?
I think that the what made him different. He learned a long time ago, and that one of his mentors when he first started in radio was that he should do something better than anybody else. That's when he realized, oh my gosh, as he was stumbling around at the stations in New England, and he was a young DJ, a young air personality. He had said that was the best advice he ever got. Do something better than everyone else, be the best at it. And that's where that was the birth of Twisted Tunes. There were parody songs out there, but they were, loosely done, maybe done with an acoustic guitar. It wasn't anything super polished. And that's where Bob said, hey man, I will be the one that will make you believe you're listening to the original song. I mean, he was a fanatic on getting the original equipment, get like on the sound pedals and his synthesizers, like whatever the band used that he was parodying, he would get that exact equipment, the same guitars if he could. It was insane how meticulous he was. So that, I think, because you can get Twisted Tunes on YouTube, that's where to start, because he hadn't done a show, really, a radio show, since he retired over 10 years ago. And, radio shows, they are of the product of the times. And sometimes if you're a new person listening, it's going to be out of time for you. But I think the Twisted Tunes are timeless. I just listened to King Trump recently,
Yeah.
and I was just cracking up because he made that song before Trump was elected the first time,
Right.
and it's just fun to hear how, and it's a takeoff of the old Steve Martin King Tut. Um, and you just get to hear the quality and what he puts into it. And of course, the wonderfully talented Spike O'Neill sang on a lot of those songs. But what if God smoked cannabis? The Joan Osborne tune, "What if God was one of us?" So
Yeah.
many of his songs. And think about this: the one thing about Christmas music that every performer I know why wants to do Christmas music, because you'll remember them. Like, you'll still hear Bing Crosby's "White Christmas" every year. You're going to hear "Walking Around in Women's Underwear" every year.
Yeah.
And that's unbelievable. Like, there are so many great radio personalities that have come and gone. I mean, people who are in the Hall of Fame. And I'm talking about people like Jack Benny that were big time radio stars. I mean, Bob Rivers is in the Hall of Fame with somebody like Jack Benny. Now, nobody listening to me knows who Jack Benny was, but my parents knew. Jack Benny
Right.
was the king of everything. Bob is like in the same place that guy is. And even Jack Benny, nobody knows, but they're going to know Bob Rivers' Twisted Tunes for such a long time. And that is something that, I mean, not everybody's going to accomplish. I won't ever accomplish something like that. No one's going to remember me in 20 years. You will remember Bob Rivers' Twisted Tunes for that long. That, to me, is right. Just the outstanding accomplishment. The fact that he will be remembered because every Christmas you're going to hear a song and think that song is funny, and that's a Bob Rivers Twisted Tune. That's his legacy. That's where I go. They're all over YouTube, and you're going to get to see the dedication, especially when you hear the song and go, "Oh my God, this sounds like the original."
Yeah.
And and Spike, of course, has great stories about meeting Bob because of Twisted Tunes, and how Spike was irritated that Bob was ruining his favorite music. And next thing you know, Spike becomes an integral part of ruining that music with these great
Right.
parody songs. And that's an amazing thing. That really is an amazing thing. Hold on, my laundry's going off. I gotta shut this
Oh
off.
boy.
Yeah, Alexa's telling me my laundry's going off. Very domestic. That's what happens when you're retired, Mike. That's what you got.
Absolutely.
That's where I would tell people to go is
Yeah.
Twisted Tunes, Bob Rivers Twisted Tunes, because an amazing, amazing accomplishment. And I know the heart and soul he put into that. He was so dedicated to making those great, and they will live on. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that is the legacy that the best that we could hope for. Being neurotic radio kids, that's all that we would hope for, is that somebody remembers us, and that we made an impact on them, and they remember how the radio host makes you feel. I think it's that power of you, that power of connection. Sure, you might have like bad takes or fiery rhetoric or whatever, but folks will remember how they made you feel in their heart, and nobody did it like Bob Rivers. And really, really one of a kind. And we've lost an icon, and we're all a little worse off for it. The world is a different place now than it was on Tuesday.
And we are also conversely better off for him being in this world and for knowing him as well. I am so blessed and
Absolutely.
grateful for what he's done for my life, what he's done for radio, and what he's done for the people that got to listen to him every day. He put smiles on people's faces. He made people's lives better. And that is a wonderful legacy, a wonderful, wonderful thing. And that's why for me, I'm such in a state of celebration.
Yeah.
I'm feeling all of it, but man, I am so happy that I got to call him friend. But that's the other thing, is that he was my friend, and he was the one that made that happen. Because I'm kind of a cantankerous person, and and I'm reclusive sometimes. And he reached out, and he made that happen. And that's something that I will always be grateful for. I don't have anything, including a real lasting friendship with a hell of a human being, if not for Bob doing that. Bob did it all, including me in his life and making me feel like I mattered. And that's a big thing to me. I mean, that the way he made you feel like you mattered is something special that only special human beings do.
Yeah, absolutely. BJ Shea, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. This has been an absolute pleasure, an absolute delight, celebrating and remembering our friend and mentor, Bob Rivers. Before we part ways, BJ, I know you're in between opportunities, as it were. Normally, at this part of the show, I would say, like, well, if you have anything you want to promote, anything you want to plug, now would be the time to do so. But if there was anything in particular that we may not have mentioned already that you wanted to give special shout outs, now would be a great time for that.
I will say this, Mike. There's a lot going on, and people have asked for explanations, and I've wondered how I wanted to do it. And I want to say to you, you reached out and you've been so kind, and I am so indebted to you for giving me the opportunity to talk about my friend. So what I will say to you, if you want in the future, I think I would like to have a conversation with you about what happened, what's going on, what's next. I've been waiting to really do it. People have said, "Hey, what's happening?" And I said, "I can't speak right now. I'm in the middle of stuff." And I currently am in the middle of stuff, but I've been talking with my agent and saying, "Look, I want to make a statement. The statements have to be made. I would love to finally talk about it, and I can't think of a better place to." And so if you want to have me back on sometime, um, and I can find out exactly what I could say, I would love to have a conversation with you about that if you want to. I didn't know where I was going to do it, but I feel like this is serendipity that you have been so kind to reach out and really want to give me the opportunity to take more time to talk about this great man that was in my life. So that's what I'll say. Right now, I'm sort of in limbo. I got stuff to say. I am doing stuff that, that's not so pretty as far as trying to just, resolve my last situation. And it's not pretty stuff. It's just, it's the ugly part of business. But I also think there is a story to tell. And if you want to give me the platform, I'd love to come back. And also just, we can talk about anything you want to talk about too, Mike. I love talking about the business. I appreciate what a fan you were of my show. And I love the fact that you were inspired to go do what you're doing and become a producer of a radio show and a fantastic one at that. That makes my heart feel so good to know that I did something that motivated somebody to do their passion. I mean, that's a wonderful thing. So I'd love to do that with you, Mike, if you want to. You may not want to. You may be like, what do I want to talk to you for? You're kind of crazy. But that's what's happening, I guess. If that even makes any sense.
That makes all the sense. And we will figure out the logistics, because again, like there are a lot of things going on, a lot of moving parts. And I know that your fans have been occasionally frustrated by the lack of information, but like there are like legalities and stuff. Like this stuff happens for like legal reasons. There's like, contracts, there's NDAs, there's that.
Yeah. And I would like to be clear, because people sometimes get confused. And I really, really want to be clear because of the wonderful relationship I have with KISW. When I left KISW, I was very, very bitter. And I tend to get bitter because I start thinking a lot of crazy thoughts, and a lot of them aren't true. Thank God for therapy. If not for Ryan Castle and Steve Miggs, who really said, man, let's do a final show. Let's do a final show. And I think it was Bob Rivers. I think Bob Rivers was now that I think about it, what a great way to end this. Bob Rivers was the one that said, hey, I know you're pissed. I know you're upset. He says, I know you're not a fan of corporations. I know how you feel about corporations. He said, but what about the people that listen to you? You're not going to give them a chance to say goodbye. And Bob got, like sit there, and I wanted to be right. I wanted to be bitter. I wanted to go out in a flame and say, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just not going to. And he said, but what about those people?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, Bob, why did you have to bring that up? You're right. So because of Bob, because of Ryan Castle, because of Dave Richards, because of Jack Hutchinson, because of Steve Miggs, all of those folks that said you should do a final show. Sure, this is not how you wanted this to end. And again, business is business. We just, radio's going through a tough time. I did. And I'm so happy that I did, because KISW gave me a chance to say goodbye to those folks. And because of that, I was able to go back in yesterday and do a wonderful tribute. They're a class act. That station's a fantastic station. I say that because my last job that I just got let go from recently wasn't at KISW. So I want people to be clear that when they hear me be bitter and upset and maybe go, yeah, I'm going through some difficult times with my last employer, that's not KISW. I really, really want to be clear about that because
Yeah.
they've been fantastic to me. And I had a great career over there and a wonderful time and worked with some of the best people I think I'll ever work with in the radio industry. So I just wanted to say that, Mike, because sometimes listeners get confused. I
Yeah.
don't want them to, because KISW is such a great place and such great people. Then when you and I talk next, it probably won't be talking about such a great place and such great people.
Right.
It won't be at all. Matter of fact, it will be talking about a horrible place with some horrible people.
Well, stay tuned for that and to be continued because yes, BJ, I would love to give you the platform to share your story when you are able to do so, because like that was my uh, motivation for having you on is not knowing that you didn't currently have a platform. We got a taste of it yesterday on KISW, but it's like I know BJ has more stories, and I want to give him runway to be able to tell them. So yeah, would love to have you on, and we could certainly chat more. But that will wrap things up for now. Our time is ended. BJ's laundry is done, so we gotta
Got to
get
get
out
to
of
that
here.
laundry, man. Someone's got to do
Absolutely.
it.
Exactly. That will wrap things up for this episode. Thank you so much for listening and for hanging out with us. We greatly appreciate it. If you want to listen to my podcast, Mike Seibert Radio, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, or wherever the hell else you get your podcasts. Like, share, rate, and review the show. Let us know what you like and what you'd like to hear more of in the future. And if you're into the Transformers, if you like robots in disguise, the new episode of Two Mikes, Too Furious drops this Friday, where it's the return of Aaron, Ryan, and Caleb, the Autopod Decepticast. They will be joining us for a conversation about Transformers Animated Season 3, Episode 5, Where Is Thy Sting? It's a real face-off situation where Bumblebee ends up being the Nicolas Cage or the John Travolta situation. You'll have to tune in to listen to that. That is going to be a lot of fun. But for now, for the one and only BJ Shea, my name is Mike. This has been Mike Seibert Radio. And until next time, make good choices.